Hello, my name is Emma, and today I am going to talk to you about a common pronunciation mistake I hear a lot, especially from my Spanish-speaking students. So if you speak Spanish, this video is definitely for you. So what is the mistake I'm talking about? Well, many people who their first language is Spanish, they make this kind of mistake. They say estudi instead of study. So what's happening here? You might have noticed I added an extra E. So this is what many Spanish speakers do because I guess in Spanish, there's often an E in front of S's. So for example, a lot of Spanish speakers might pronounce special like especial, or they might pronounce school like eschool. So is this a mistake you make in your pronunciation? Do you add an E before the S in English? Again, this is a really common pronunciation mistake, and I'm going to teach you how to get better at your pronunciation. Before we get there though, I just had 2 recommendations. I've noticed many people don't even know they're making this mistake. The number of times I'll talk to somebody who's a Spanish speaker who's speaking English, and I'll say, oh, you added an E here. And they keep saying, no, I'm not. Eschool. And they don't actually hear the difference sometimes. They don't realize they're doing it. So if you don't know if you're making this mistake, one of the things you can do is you can actually record yourself. Record yourself saying special. Try to listen to yourself say school or study and compare and ask yourself, am I adding an E to this word? If you have a teacher who teaches English, or if you know a native speaker of English, maybe you have a friend who speaks English, you can ask them, do I make this mistake? Do I add an E in front of the S on these words? Because again, many people do not know they make this mistake. So now let's talk about how to fix this mistake. And yes, there is a solution. Okay, so this might take you a little bit of time and practice, but getting rid of this extra E is really worth the effort. So what do I recommend doing? Well, what I would recommend is think about what words you use a lot that have, SP or SC. For example, maybe you say study a lot. Maybe you say Spanish or Spain or school or speech or spelling. Anything that has an SP in it that you use a lot or an SC, I would recommend starting to make a list. Think about which words do I have a lot of trouble with, and then take time to practice those words. Rewrite them to help you with the pronunciation. So together we are going to do this. I'm going to show you how I would rewrite some of these words and how I would get better at their pronunciation. So I have here a common mistake I hear many of my students make. They say, I estudi. So what I would do is I would rewrite this as ice, tuddy. Ice, tuddy. You'll notice that the vowel is also a bit different. Many speakers have trouble with their vowel sounds. So it's not stu, it's not a oo sound, it's a sta, a. And just to remind myself, I'm just going to put a little A here. So I would start by saying this really slow. Ice, study. Ice, study. And then I'd start to say it a little faster. And as I say it faster, I'd start to move my finger because sometimes, even though we're using our voices, moving the finger can actually help the way we say things. So I would start to say, I study. I study. And slowly bring it together. Okay, so let's do this one more time. This time I want you to do the same thing. If you need to pause the video, that's okay. Write down this, get your finger ready, and together, let's do this. Okay, so when you're ready, we can say, I study. I study. Okay? And again, it might take you some time. That's okay. Eventually, after some practice, the goal is to say, I study. I study. Let's say it in a full sentence. I study English. I study English. Okay? Now let's try another example of this. We have here in Spanish. In Spanish. How do we get rid of this E? Okay, so this is the E that's the problem. Well, let's write it like this. In, then I have CE, so ins, Panish, Panish. So let's do each word separately first. Ins, Panish. Ins, Spanish. Now I'm going to start saying it a little faster. In Spanish. In Spanish. What I want you to do is write down this word as I've written it down. Get that finger ready. You can pause the video now to do this. And when you're ready, let's do it together, but let's use our finger to slow down. In Spanish. In Spanish. In Spanish. Okay. What can I say about in Spanish? Okay, here's the sentence. In Spanish, we add an E. In Spanish, we add an E. All right, let's look at another word you might say. Maybe you're talking about the country Spain. And maybe instead of saying Spain, you're saying Espain. So how can we get rid of this E? Well, I've written it as pain. Pain. So I want you to say those two words. Pain. And now let's bring it together and say it a little faster. Spain. Pain. Sorry, sometimes it's hard for me to even do this. Spain. 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 That one was better. Spain. Okay? And again, that finger can really help you with the pronunciation. Okay, here's another thing you might talk about. Maybe you're talking about your children and they go to school. Maybe you want to say they're at school. So how can we get rid of this E and say their school? Well, here I've written it as there's cool. There's cool. And as we say it together, we bring it together, we can say their school. Their school. Let's do it one last time together. Their school. And now let's say it faster. Their school. Okay? Now I have this. Excellent a speech. Again, I don't want this E. So I'm going to rewrite it into excellence with a CE and peach. So let's say this first in two words. Excellence, peach. Excellence, peach. Okay, so repeat after me. Excellence, peach. Now let's bring it together. Excellent speech. Excellent speech. One more time. Let's do it a little bit faster this time. Excellent speech. Excellent speech. Okay, so we're going to do a couple more words like this, but I think you're starting to get the idea. Rewrite the word A lot of the times you'll notice that the S looks like CE in the first part. So instead of saying Spain, I've written the S like CE and pain. So this is something that can be really helpful to break it down, to slow down your speech, and then you speed it up. So now let's look at a couple more examples. Okay, so the next word or the next phrase we're going to talk about is my specialty. Is that correct? No, I've added an E sound. That isn't actually there. If you haven't noticed already, all of these words or expressions are spelt incorrectly. I've added an extra E, but in the actual spelling, it looks like this, my specialty. So how do we get rid of this E in our pronunciation if we're having trouble with this? Well, again, we can just write it out differently and practice, practice, practice. So instead of saying my specialty, I've changed it to mice specialty. Mice specialty. Now, as we say it a little faster, I'm going to put the linking here. My specialty. My specialty. And now let's let's speed it up a bit. My specialty. My specialty. My specialty. All right, now I have the word, this is spelling. I've added the E that people pronounce incorrectly. Her spelling. So what can we say instead of her spelling? Well, what we want to say is we want to say her spelling. So how can we say this? Well, I've rewritten it here. I've written hers spelling. So let's do this together. Hers spelling. Let's do our little linking here. Her spelling. Her spelling. Her spelling. Now one more time, this time a little faster. Her spelling. And again, this might take you time. It's not easy to change your pronunciation. And you might have to record yourself doing this. One of the things that learners sometimes do is they think they're doing something right, and then they practice, 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 but they're still making some sort of mistake in their pronunciation. So it's really important when you do this to record yourself and listen to how you're pronouncing things, or ask a friend if they're a native speaker of English, or if they have really great pronunciation in English, or if they're a teacher. Ask them to listen to you do this to make sure that you're doing it correctly. All right, let's do one more. This is the last one for luck. I have here, so the word I want to say is specialty. A lot of Spanish speakers will add this E and say a specialty. Again, this is how it's spelled, specialty. So instead of saying a specialty, what can we say? Well, again, I have the CE. And so this is specialty. Specialty. And now let's link it. Specialty. 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 And now one more time fast. Specialty. All right. Well, that was a really good workout. I feel like we just did a lot of exercise, actually. So if you want to do more practice with this, I recommend coming and visiting our website at www.engvid.com. There you can actually do a quiz to practice what you learned in today's video. I also would like to invite you to subscribe to my channel. I have a lot more videos on pronunciation, on grammar, on vocabulary, and all sorts of different topics. So come check it out. Don't forget to ring the bell to make sure you're getting all of our latest videos. You can also check out my website at www.teacheremma.com. There you can actually find more resources that have to do with English, language learning, and just different topics in general. So thank you so much for watching, and until next time, Take care.